Welcome, acolytes. Today I am reacting to Monte Sensei's Berserk 97 just entered the top 5 anime for me. Well, he's not the only one and won't be the last. Berserk, one of the freaking best mangas, animes in the effing world. Acolytes, I doubt that anybody dislikes Berserk, but I understand if somebody doesn't like the gut spilling. But let's just see what Monta has to say.
Berserk 1997 has officially entered my top 5 favorite anime,
Hell
along
yeah.
with others full of characters that come from troubled pasts having their own way of dealing with it, and Guts is definitely a troubled character. Someone who knows death all too well, literally being born from a dead corpse, so when confronted by death, he's no stranger to it, almost looking forward to the challenge it may bring.
Yep, it is. And to think that almost because of the passing of the drawer himself that actually invented Berserk, I don't remember his name, but it almost didn't continue. And yet, here we are, 20 years later, and it continues.
Someone who's justified in his anger, never knowing a moment of peace, almost like he was destined for sorrow, sadness, and hardship, forever followed by a black cloud, no escape in sight, forced to carry a weight and shoulder a burden only he can lift. Lacking any purpose, only knowing the way of the sword, holding it like it's his best friend. Like what Vegeta is for Denji, the sword is for Guts. It's serving as the only source that has ever brought protection and solace in his life, because any other person he's ever placed his trust in betrayed him while stealing his innocence away from him. And while I can't relate to Guts as far as the details and specifics go, and I pray for the living soul who can, as I watch, I feel like I'm alongside him in his journey, keeping him company on the roof, contemplating life, walking down a dirt road beside him, waiting for whatever's to come next, watching his back on the battlefield and celebrating with a drink afterwards, being part of his camaraderie. And when he finds that camaraderie, you're happy for him, because being that loneliness is what he's accustomed to is something he's reluctant to accept at first, but in due time he learns to appreciate it.
And by the way, they depicted the loneliness when somebody that is actually a lonely human being, how hard it is for the person to actually come into the camaraderie. He wants to, but it's hard for him. And this slow acceptance is just very realistic.
People who have his back just as much as he has theirs, learning that this mercenary group isn't just something to be hired into, but a brotherhood to be accepted in. Each member with their own personalities that stand out in their own comedic and honorable way, with Judo being one of my favorite amongst the bunch, a character who's very observant, self-aware, understanding, able to read the situations, knowing what's best for the characters and especially Guts. Giving him advice that suits him well, nudging him in a direction that Guts feels he must go innately, but Judo reinforces. Seeing the spark of attraction and love that Guts has for Casca,
and by the way, Judo, perfectly written, wise character. Wise beyond his age. This was just such a well-written, done young man that actually knows his shit, because at the end of the day, he doesn't push anyone in the direction that he wants to force the person. He gives them stones they can build on, and then watches how they actually come out of it.
Casca has for Guts that no one saw coming, but out of their many fights, there was a seed of love blossoming into a moment that Guts will never forget and will forever cherish. But it's a love that didn't come easy. Griffith being the only person Casca ever lived for and worshipped, envied the light of admiration that Guts was for Griffith. That Guts could be there for him without any dedication, she was willing to put forth herself for him. But a moment of solitude between the two forced them into a situation that brought them closer together, that made Guts understand why she lashes out at him so much on the behalf of Griffith, but also forced Casca to understand that Guts does put his comrades before himself, assuming that his recklessness he only did to be self-serving, but is done because he's willing to sacrifice himself for his men, willing to take on 100 soldiers engaging in battle tactics he could easily maneuver through and out of, but not at the cost of her own safety. She sees the real person for who Guts is, leading to other conversations and heartfelt moments that deepen their relationship, where they now have a unique bond that only the two of them can understand. that while, yes, Casca is a very capable soldier, taking on a masculine role, it's around Guts she's able to still be feminine, and values being seen as a woman first.
I look silly, don't I? The truth.
No, you look very lovely.
Really?
Able to be soft-spoken, in the beginning hoping he would die in battle and quickly.
I hope you drop dead in battle. And soon.
By the way, this is also the character. Casca is just such a perfectly on point written character. It's actually outstanding how many good written characters there are. Casca is one of those that even if you have a like, Casca is the woman that actually the feminist movement want to be. And they never will. Because Casca has some balls, but she still wants to live herself out. She knows what she has to do, and she knows what she is. And as depicted, Guts accepted her as she is, no matter what, because he knew, okay, it is what it is. And he's gonna act accordingly. And this is a thing that a lot of people just don't understand. That sometimes if somebody's doing the things they are doing, a lot of the time, if they aren't malicious, by the way, you always have to look for the maliciousness, acolytes. But if Casca, at the end of the day, she was at the start she didn't like Guts because she knew, okay, he's acting like an asshole, she doesn't accept him, but after she actually understood him, it went 180. And this was a slow, nice build-up of accepting who he is, how he acts, and he actually also learned from her, as she did from him. And they just made a beautiful bond, and yeah, you know.
Never wanting to see him leave once he chooses to, doing whatever she can to prevent him from doing so. And when he finally does leave, it isn't Griffith who she prioritizes first anymore. It's now Guts, becoming more sad in his absence. And when he finally does return, it's as the savior Casca needed him to be, making an epic entrance, which leads to a release of resentment she had for him for leaving, feeling a sense of abandonment from him, but eventually leads to one of the most romantic scenes I have ever seen in a story, with the manga detailing it even more, not necessarily the act, but the vulnerability that was shared between the two that deepens their bond even further. Because at this point, as a viewer, you kind of fall in love with Casca yourself, but you fall in love with their relationship even more, now wanting to see it flourish and last forever, thinking this is what Guts deserves after a life lived of sorrow, struggle, and trauma. Being surrounded by his old comrades, all wanting him to lead them now. And he realizes this is what he's been searching for all along. The love of a woman willing to accept him, flaws and all, and a brotherhood full of loyalty that money can't buy. Something he didn't know he had till he was gone. But the journey of solitude he went on was necessary because it makes him appreciate it even more once it's now in front of him. Something he should have took Judo's advice on earlier, but is willing to grab hold of it now more than ever.
Correctly. And by the way, nobody's perfect. Mistakes will be made. But the thing is why Guts is so sympathetic is because he actually learned from his mistakes. And then shit got awry. So
Guts has found fulfillment and some type of happiness. But that's when the black cloud over him returns. And when he's closest to peace is when he finds tragedy the most. Which I won't go into detail because it's hard to revisit some of those scenes, which is why I say Berserk isn't for the weak, and as one of my subscribers said, it's not for the faint of heart, and it isn't. It's just like the Red Wedding scene in Game of Thrones. While that show is some of the best television I've ever seen up to a certain season, the Red Wedding is something I only need to see once. Guts just faces a degree of betrayal you can't even imagine. Seeing all of his men, friends, brothers in arms wiped out in an instant, suffering in their last moments by the hands of the person they trusted and served most. Casca, the woman he loves, being treated. You know what? Let's just leave that alone. It's too much to bear, too much, moving on. It's crazy because him and Griffith were like best friends.
Yeah, and by the way, why I think the scene with Casca is so memorable, let's just say it like that, so for fuck's sake, this guy, is because we actually had the bond with the character so much, because I agree with him. It's honestly bad what happened. Very bad. Very bad. But I still would argue that death, the end of all things, is worse. But if you like the character more, you will feel way more empathy.
But in moments becomes Guts' worst enemy.
Yes,
Not on
best
some this is a
villain,
regular
by the way,
theme that
Griffith.
plays out in the story sometimes. No, you as the viewer feel betrayed, carrying the same
Yes.
animus and hatred towards Griffith that Guts does.
As
Guts
you should.
finally found peace, and it was stolen from him, and it's because of Griffith that Guts reverts back to his old Berserk mode, now more than ever, rageful, swing first only, where the idea of calmness is now a foreign concept to him. And in my opinion, Guts must become the same person he was when confronted by Griffith before leaving the band of Hawks. He was someone who wasn't easily fazed anymore or quick to anger. He was calm, composed, very sure of himself, without resentment or the taste of hate towards anyone, no longer having this spite towards life itself. That was someone Griffith can't defeat. And he must end Griffith not for the sake of revenge, as Godo was lecturing him about, but because Griffith must be stopped, period. Because Griffith is like a black hole that consumes everything around him for the sake of his own dream. And it's like he has a charismatic gravitational pull that attracts people towards him, even if they are aware he would gladly sacrifice them for his dream. But the one person who was immune to that gravitational pull was Guts. And it's that sucked Griffith into Guts' own gravitational pull. For the first time, he was someone who wouldn't kiss his ass, who was willing to forge his own path absent Griffith. Someone who has his own light that doesn't need to live under the shadow of Griffith, who could actually live for himself. And in my opinion, Griffiths quietly envy that while admiring it at the same time. Griffith needs people to adore him, look up to him, whose lives have no meaning or value outside of serving Griffith himself. And while Guts was willing to serve Griffith for a period of time, Guts was never fully captured by Griffith like the rest of his comrades were. Guts became equal to him, maybe even beyond. Like the person Griffith said could actually be his friend, but when confronted by it, he couldn't handle it, being beaten and being moved on from. That actually his dream cannot be without Guts being there. Guts fully became that person on their last duel. The Berserk Guts can tear any opponent down except for Griffith, but the composed, fully self-aware Guts can. Something even Griffith was unnerved by during the start of their duel.
I can sense no anger from him, no rage, no fear. He is empty, present.
And that is who Griffith fears most. And I think the last chapter is when Guts is on his way to becoming that again. My theory, that he's going to go through a whole arc of full self-reflection while being locked away in solitude. Because he could have went berserk mode to escape this, but I think he had a moment of self-defeat, hopelessness, and just tired of going berserk mode one too many times. Tired of fighting, tired of moving, tired of sorrow, and tired of loss. That going berserk has only brought him more sadness now more than ever. And I think during these next few volumes we may receive, he's finally going to become that person who is composed, sure of himself, with no resentment towards life, like the day he left Griffith, but even more. And I think the self-reflection in this cell will lead to that transformation. To Kentaro Miura, rest in peace, and thank you for giving us a story like Berserk, a story of Guts.
And by the way, the digression of Guts himself is actually quite realistic also. Because in the end of the day, if you would go through the stuff that Guts went through, no matter how far in life you are, that destroys a man. That just destroys. And Guts, he just pushes. He just pushes. And especially those misunderstanding between Guts and Griffith was beautifully made. Beautifully made. Because Guts interpreted the words of Griffith as the way that he done things. Griffith actually wanted Guts to stay, but told him that the only one who can be his friend is someone who actually does stuff by himself, or that follows his own dreams. And Guts thought, okay, my path to that is actually going out, finding myself, and then coming back. Of course, Griffith didn't understand that.
someone I view as a hero or anti-hero in the least. Someone, as I said earlier, I can't relate to as far as the details, but feel like I'm right beside him on his journey, always rooting for him, pushing him forward, and only want to see the best for him. And it may sound a bit selfish, but I just hope I get to see Guts finally happy before I die myself personally. Please don't be like the Game of Thrones author where everyone has lost hope that those books will ever come out. This is a story that selfishly I admit I hope I get closure for sooner than later, because I think many of us, we just want to see Guts happy. He's had enough.
Yep.
And I think he's ready to receive it. So R.I.P. Miura, and thank you again for a phenomenal, exceptional story that has proved to be generational.
Yep.
And that's all I have for this video. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. Is Berserk something you've ever gotten into? As said,
Beautifully done. Beautifully done. It's just, I can't just agree with the man. Monte Sensei is just on point with every single thing he said, actually. Okay, no, I cannot add anything more to that. It's just, if you didn't watch Berserk, then a bit of a warning. It's very brutal. It has a lot of blood spilled, so there's that. But in the end of the day, if you can look past that, like I did, Acolytes, because at the start I didn't want to watch Berserk because of the entire killing, gut spilling and stuff. But for now, after I watched it once, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing. So if you can watch past that, it's just do it. But as it is, good night.